Welcome everybody. How are you today? Thank you for joining us this morning. Today's class is the basics of sustainable landscape. I am going to go through a few slides with you right now prior to John starting the actual class. Just want to give you some information to help you through our class this morning. All right, so here is the list of classes we have for the remainder of the calendar year. Today's class is the basics of sustainable landscaping, and they're once a month through December. Every month is a different class topic, so you will never see the same class twice. And if you would like to look at one of the classes, if you missed a class or you're going to miss a class, we record them. So we're actually recording every class we do. And the week after class, we put it up on our website and you're able to go in and watch the recording. So let's see. So each class is roughly 1 hour, followed by a question and answer period. If you look at the second bullet point, that is the link that you would go into. So it's yourscvwater.com is our website. And then if you go into gardening classes and click on there, and it will bring you into the RSVP area, and also to the right of that screen, on the screen of the RSVP, to the right is all the recorded classes. We have been recording classes since August of last year, and they're all on there. So all of our classes are on there. So wanted to go over a couple of things. We have the handouts, which is the PowerPoint that I'm going through with you now, and then the PowerPoint that John will go through with you about the actual topic of the class. I have attached them, so if you click on the red arrow to the right of your screen, sometime during this morning's class, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, click on the red arrow. Well, actually, if you click on the red arrow, it will open up the chat box. And then there's a chat box and it says questions. You can go in there and you can write questions to John about the class during the class, and he will answer the questions at the end of this session. So if you just go in and if you just want to start writing questions as they pop into your mind, just write them in, and then as soon as class is completed, as soon as the PowerPoint is done, I'll go in and I will read all the questions and John will answer them. Also in that little section is an area called Handouts. If you want to click on it and save them to your computer, then you have them for future reference. Once today's class is over, that file will no longer be able to be viewed. So you could either download them right now into your computer and save them for later, or you can email me and I'll send them to you right after class. So let's see, then the next thing is a survey. We'll send you out a short survey after class. 3 questions. If you could just answer the questions real quick, just take you a couple of minutes. That will definitely help us for our future classes. See what our participants are enjoying or not, or what, if you have any ideas, that would be wonderful. And then the last bullet point is my name, Karen Dankinger, and my email. So if you want to jot down my email address, you can email me anytime after class, and I will respond back to you. Just send me an email and I'll send them to you. I will not check my email during class, but I will be checking it after that. So my email is kdankinger@scvwa.org. So if you want to send me an email at any time, you're welcome to. So this is a slide on who we are. We're SCV Water. It shows our service areas, shows the size of our service area. This is how to connect with us. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we have YouTube videos up. You just have to search SCV Water on YouTube and you can see all the videos that we have created. And then we also have rebates for all of you, for our residents, that will help you save water and money. If you'd like to go on when you have time, it's conserve.yourscvwater.com, and it'll show you all the rebates that we have available. Oops. Shoot, sorry, one sec. Okay, sorry about that. This is our landscape resource page. We have SCV's hottest plant guide. We have, so we've got your scvwater.com landscape restoration information. We've got a couple other resources, a page on conservation tips. We have a page called Santa Clarita Gardens, which we have gone around to other people's homes in Santa Clarita and taken photos of their front yard, backyard, side yard, hill, landscape, hillside. Anyways, there's some good information you can find on those sites right there. And then we have a Water Smart workshop. If you click into watersmartworkshop.com and go through, you will learn how to read your bill, how to identify and fix leaks, as well as other common home water issues. Once you complete it, you get a $20 credit on your water bill. It doesn't take very long. I did it about 6 months ago, and I learned some stuff, and I got $20 on my water bill. So that was a $20 credit, which was always nice. All right. So now I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint for the class itself. I'm going to get rid of the screen so you won't see me and you won't hear me. You'll only see and hear John. We'll go through the entire PowerPoint presentation, and when it's over, I'll pop my screen back in so you'll see me again, and we will go through the question and answer period. So if you can, as we go through, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the question box on the chat screen. All right, John, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, let's go to the first slide. And welcome to the class on sustainability. And what that really means is the ability of the landscape to be maintained now and into the future. And we can do that by minimizing the input and the output. A lot of what we do is not really sustainable. If you think about a big, lush, green lawn, well, it's not really sustainable because we're putting so much effort into it. The mowing, the watering, the fertilizing, the occasional weed control or pest control, and then all of the waste, all of the grass clippings that we have to send to the landfills. So sustainability is how we can perhaps reduce or minimize the amount of waste that we produce and the amount of material that we have to use. A good sustainable landscaping is one that requires very little maintenance and very little input. Next. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about your existing landscape. We're not going to suggest that you tear your landscaping out and redo it or anything else. We're simply going to give you some ideas on what you can do with the existing landscape. And some of those ideas would be to use mulch. That is great for the soil and holds moisture in. Composting, so that perhaps we're not sending quite as much material to the landfill. Fertilizers, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference in those and how to use them. Talk a little bit about trees and pruning, because once again, pruning would also produce waste. And irrigation, efficient irrigation, so we're not wasting the water. And we'll talk about a little bit about saving the rainwater. We'll talk about how to make our irrigation more efficient and how to use plant material that uses less water, and perhaps less maintenance. Next. So here you see is landscaped area where they've definitely reduced the amount of lawn. Uh, they've got plants and trees and some hardscape, but the size of the lawn is reduced dramatically. And that's one way you can make your landscaping more sustainable, have minimal turf areas. Uh, keeping your lawn up as high as possible. A good lawn should be anywhere from 3 to 3.5 inches after you cut it. Most of us are cutting our lawns way too short, and this has a negative impact on the lawn. Okay, and the use of organic fertilizers is better for the soil and better for the plants and better for the environment. We'll talk a little bit about that and how and when we prune can also reduce the output, what we're filling up the green barrels with. Next. And obviously grass clippings are one of the biggest offenders. Tons of grass clippings are sent every single day to the dump. And if we could reduce that, uh, that would be great, because a couple of years ago, any of you that have lived in Santa Clarita for a while now know that there was a proposal to add another landfill to the area, because right now we're sending our waste to either Val Verde or Granada Hills, and there was a proposal to build another landfill in Ellesmere Canyon, right off the 14. And of course, it got voted down because nobody wants a landfill in their city. But we are so wasteful, we are such consumers that we need a place to put all our trash. And with grass clippings being something that we can do something about, these are a couple of ideas. There are lawnmowers that will actually cut the grass up enough that it can be returned back into the soil. They're called mulching mowers, and they actually return the nutrients back into the soil. So it's a great idea. Uh, I know I certainly do that I have a very small lawn, and I go over it several times with the mower, cuts the pieces up very small, and they just go back down into the soil. Next. So you can buy lawnmowers that are called mulching mowers. You can take a regular lawnmower and mow back and forth and then back and forth the other direction, and you'll chop the pieces up smaller. Using a lawnmower without a bag on it is also another way of getting that stuff back down into the grass. And as I mentioned, keep your grass as high as possible. Never cut more than a third off. Don't mow wet grass, and go horizontal and then vertical when you're mowing. And you'd be surprised how much of that grass can just go right back down into the soil and help to feed the lawn. Next. Soil compaction, that's a real problem we have, and the reason is right there on the screen. When they build new houses, the codes say that they have to compact the soil to a particular depth, and that depth can be anywhere from 5 to 7 feet. And the big machines that you're seeing there, that's what they're doing. When they excavate, they have to, if they follow behind the excavators, they've got these machines that actually compact the soil. And that's great for the house. It makes the houses more stable during earthquakes, but very, very, very bad for water penetration It suffocates the soil. It pushes the oxygen out, makes it very difficult for plants to grow in it. And then if you have a high soil content, it makes a bad situation worse. Next. So there's a couple of ways to combat this compaction problem, and the use of mulches, the use of amendments when you plant or when you rototill. You can till in gypsum and amendments into the soil, and this will get the earthworms and the other biological inhabitants of the soil. This gives them someplace great to live, and then they actually do the job of aerating the soil. Another thing we can do is use slow, deep irrigation, watering once a week, deeply, instead of multiple times a week, shallow. Don't keep the soil saturated. We don't want our soil to constantly be wet. We don't want to look out there and constantly see mud. When the water goes in, the oxygen comes out, and the roots need oxygen. Next. So here are two things that we can do, and these are two of the best things we can do to the soil. And mulch, simply laid on top of the soil, will help to control weeds, hold the moisture in, and help to regulate the temperature, keep the roots of the trees and the shrubs and the plants from heating up. Composting is where we take decomposed material and work it back into the soil. And this does lots of wonderful things for the soil, including, once again, making it very hospitable for the worms and other microorganisms. So composting is great. If you can't compost yourself, if you don't have the space, the time, or the inclination, then you can buy compost. You can go to the nursery and buy a bag of compost. And quite often that compost is material that has been recycled. In other words, the green trash bin that you pay for every month, that goes to a landfill and it is put into a large pile. It is composted. It is then bagged up and sold back to you. The capitalist way. It's a wonderful thing. Next. So typically when we're talking about mulches, we're talking about organic materials. We're talking about things that came from plants, grasses, and trees. Recycled plant material. Okay. Other things are often called mulch, but they don't have the same beneficial effect on the soil. That would be things like rocks and gravel, decomposed granite, sand, ground rubber, etc. And as you can see, those items that are listed there, those are basically to form walkways, etc., and to prevent weeds. So DG makes a very suitable pathway, but I wouldn't want to put DG around my plants, trees, or shrubs. Next. So what we mean by organic is that it was at one time living. And our plant-based mulches come from the things that we would take out of our yard. The grass clippings, the tree trimmings, the shrub trimmings. They can be used raw. And you can just see the list of wonderful things that this raw plant-based mulch can do for your soil. A nice layer, anywhere from 2 to 4 inches, helps to reduce weeds as it breaks down. That compaction we're talking about, because of the earthworms, etc., and the microorganisms, we can help to loosen up the soil. The beneficial insects and microbes love to live in it. When the rain hits it, it won't erode the soil, and it moderates the temperature. So plant-based mulches are an easy and beneficial way to treat your garden. Next. Now, this is important. We don't want to put mulch right up to the trunks of our trees or shrubs. We want to keep them at least a foot away from the foundations, and it has to be about 2 to 4 inches thick to really do good. In open areas, 4 to 6 inches is fine, but I have found that 2 to 4 works fine almost everywhere. And then keep in mind, there are a few plants that have surface roots that actually don't benefit from mulching. And that would be plants like citrus trees and avocados. They have roots right at the surface, and those roots help the plant to breathe, and they can't be covered. I once read a book on citrus growing, and it was written by several citrus farmers, and they said the only thing they wanted to see on the ground below their citrus trees were citrus leaves that had fallen. So those are a couple of exceptions where we don't necessarily want to mulch on top of those two types of trees. Next. Now, as compost breaks down, it's actually eaten by these soil organisms. And this can happen in a big pile. And when that happens, all that energy becomes heat. And that's why if you've ever had a compost pile, you may see steam rising off it. That's because all those little organisms in there are eating it and breaking it down, and it actually does create heat. And sometimes that heat can be 140 degrees. You can stick your arm down into it, it's quite warm. Then there is a process called cold composting, and this is where you use earthworms. So you don't use earthworms in a typical compost pile. That heat wouldn't be good for them. But if you're using a cold compost pile, just a pile of leaves, and you're putting some worms in it, they will help to break it down without necessarily the heat. If you're going to be making a compost pile, I believe we're going to give you some information on that, or a link as to how to do that. But right here, the carbon is formerly living things, plant material. The nitrogen comes in the form of green, formerly living things. This would be green leaves and grass clippings. Air, we have to turn it over occasionally to get air in there, and we water it. We don't want our compost pile to ever dry out. Next. Now we're going to talk a little bit about fertilizers and the different kinds, because you can go to the nursery and see hundreds of fertilizers. And the main difference in them is that some of them are what we call organic. In other words, they're made from formerly living things, but in this case, those formerly living things can be plants or animals. They generally are fairly raw, not too much processing. They can be plant-based, animal-based, or mineral-based. And organic materials are generally better for the soil, better for the microbes in there, and they release a little slower. And on the right side of the screen there, you'll see some of the raw ingredients that organic fertilizers are made of. There may be some other things, but these are the top half dozen or so that almost all organic fertilizers are composed of. Next. So an organic fertilizer will feed over a longer period of time. It'll release slowly and thus have to be applied less often. Less chance of pollution from runoff, less chance of damaging your plant. Now that last line there, organic fertilizers typically don't work, or the fertilizer part of them is not released during cold temperatures. So if the nights are going to fall below 45, your organic fertilizers are just not going to work. But your organic fertilizers can be used during spring, summer, and fall, and a very little chance of burning using them. Next. And then the advantage of trees, shade. The more shade you have, you can obviously run your air conditioner less. If it's a beautiful tree, properly placed, it can increase your property value and puts more oxygen into the air. Now, consider where you're putting it, though. There are problems with some trees, and that would be the roots, that would be the branches, and of course, the leaves. So before you plant a tree, research that tree a lot, because there are good trees and there are not so good trees, and also the placement of the trees. Very important, but can have tremendous benefits to a yard. Next. Now, one of the ways that we impact the amount of material that we remove from our yard is with pruning. And sometimes we prune a little too much. Sometimes we just get in a habit of calling in the tree trimmers to prune every year, or have the gardeners prune every week. And the number one reason for pruning is safety. If there's a hazard, if there's a defect in the tree, then it may have to be trimmed for safety reasons. Quite often we trim to form plants into a desired shape. And if we've chosen the correct plant, that's not a big deal. But if we choose a fast-growing plant and then want to maintain it relatively small, then we're going to be doing an awful lot of pruning on that. So occasionally a plant will outgrow its desired size and will need to be pruned back. And some plants this is okay for, some plants it rejuvenates it. And then with other types of plants, it can actually hurt the plants and prevent flower and fruit development. But proper pruning, especially with things like fruit trees and flowers like roses, can actually benefit the plants. Next. So this is an idea of what proper pruning should look like. You can see in this case, the tree has been opened up. The wind can pass through it, but it still maintains its original shape. We didn't try to take a broad-headed tree and turn it into a pyramidical tree. Next. Okay, now we're going to talk just a bit about irrigation. You've probably all heard of drip irrigation, and in some places in the yard, drip irrigation may be the answer. But for larger areas, and certainly for your lawn and maybe ground cover areas, basic sprinklers work just fine. And they have come up with very efficient sprinkler heads nowadays that you don't get quite the evaporation from. They have to be run a little longer, but they're much more efficient. They put the water on with greater precision. There are also heads that are designed to shoot only a certain distance, 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 or 12. And any pattern that you like is pretty much available. So adjusting the sprinkler heads, buying the correct sprinkler head for the area can definitely make your irrigation system more efficient. Next. Now, this is something that new homes are doing. In fact, I think it's built into a lot of the city codes now. And what it simply means is trying to keep as much of the rainwater on the property as is practical. We generally can do this underground. So you may see that there's a slight hump or curve there and a little indentation in the middle. And then all the rainwater is channeled down there, and it will seep into the ground and be available for a longer period of time. In the old days, when they were building houses back in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, the main thought was to get the water off the property as soon as possible, get it into the streets, get it down into the rain channels, and get it out to the ocean as fast as possible. And that has proven to be absolutely harmful because we're getting rid of all that beautiful, wonderful water, and then we have to import more water. So if we can save or preserve some of that rainwater, it'll go a long way towards preventing us from importing water, because there is only a finite amount of water in the area. Okay, next. So this is a, believe it or not, this is called a rain garden. All of the rainwater from the property is channeled down into this area here, and you can see it's got rocks on top of it and some shrubs, but this is actually a low area. And then the water that comes off the driveway, off the roof, etc., will channel into here and percolate down into the soil. And it's something that, like I said, new homes are being designed like this, and sometimes you don't even notice it. I have seen this in new homes. It might simply be an indentation in the middle of the yard. Doesn't have to be very deep, as you can see. Sometimes it's 4 inches or 12 inches, barely noticeable. But if all the water drains into there, it'll then soak into the soil. Next. And then container gardening is another way to conserve water, because you're only putting the water exactly where it's needed, right into the individual pots. And typically, you're either doing this by hand watering or you have a drip system. But you're not having a sprinkler system that is simply throwing water everywhere. So containers can actually be water conserving. Next. Now here's a great looking raised bed area. And as you can see, there's vegetables growing in there, and then flowers mixed in on the outside. You can see that there's pavers and permeable gravel there, so that all the water will once again soak in. There isn't a whole lot of waste here. An area like this could be watered with drip or with standard sprinklers, and almost all of the water will be going towards the benefit of the plants. Very little waste in an area like this. Next. Now, regarding the plant material, there are plants, and you've heard this term before, drought tolerant or drought resistant. And these plants all have approximately the same sort of benefits to the yard. Aside from obviously needing to be watered less often, they all can take sunlight and heat quite well because they control how much moisture they actually give off. They control the water that transpires through them and out. And they have smaller leaves as a rule, and the leaves are waxy. This also helps them to do the photosynthesis without losing a lot of water, and it makes them tolerant of heat and sunlight. So drought-tolerant plants are great for the landscape and can be watered less often, and they use less moisture through their system. Next. Choosing plants. So here in Santa Clarita, you've lived here for a while, you know we have a couple of things that we can absolutely depend on. Wind. We have had some tremendous windstorms come through lately. Intense sun. Low humidity. Very hot summers, 100 degrees plus. And then our winters, we can get some cold snaps where it freezes. Sometimes we have clay soil. We've already discussed the compacted soil. However, our water quality is fairly good. Our water tends to come from the aqueducts, which start up at the Sacramento River up north. So the water quality is pretty good. But the wind, the sun, the low humidity, the high heat, we have to keep all those things in mind when we're choosing plants. So perhaps plants like hydrangeas and fuchsias and azaleas aren't the best choices for Santa Clarita. Next. So where can we find out about these plants? Well, one place is the Sunset Western Garden Book, which unfortunately is out of print, but you may be able to find it at a used bookstore. And according to the Sunset Western Garden, our area here, Santa Clarita, is considered Zone 18. So when you look in that book, it will list every plant and it will tell you what zones they will grow in. It'll also tell you the plant size, how big the plant's going to get. It will tell you what if there's any microclimate needs, whether the plant needs perhaps shade in the afternoon or more moisture than anything else. And then if you opt to buy a plant that maybe won't grow too well in the middle of the yard, you may want to choose a pot that you could move to a particular section of the yard, or move as the sun moves through the yard, or move as the temperatures change. Next. Did we skip one there?
Hold on, let me, I clicked too fast, so give me a sec to get back.
Sure. But basically what we're going to talk about is if you have to plant, why not use edible plants, plants that can do more than just be landscape plants. And there's a couple of excellent choices for our area. The first one is a plant that could be a tree or a large shrub, could be a multi-trunk. It's called the pineapple guava. It is an excellent plant, takes the heat, the sun. It grows quite well here in Santa Clarita. It produces an edible flower and an edible fruit. And it is green all year and gives you very few problems. Next. Next is the pomegranate. The pomegranate, we all know the benefits of eating pomegranate juice and eating pomegranates. And they grow very easily, very little care. In the heat of summer, you might want to water it once a week. The rest of the year, maybe not at all. I've never fertilized mine, but some people say they like to fertilize theirs one time in the early spring. You can put this in the hottest, sunniest, driest spot in the yard, and it will grow Needs very little trimming and very little anything else, but it will produce lots of beautiful fruit for you. Next. There are some herbs that we can plant, and they're wonderful landscaping plants. Uh, there's at least 3 that we're going to look at here, and they all, once again, will have the same benefits of loving the sun, the heat, and have reduced water requirements and don't need any fertilizer at all. And you may even be able to use some of these plants when you're cooking. The rosemary, of course, is a very tough plant, very durable, makes an excellent ground cover. Smells great. I use it in the olive oil, and there's various recipes that call for fresh rosemary. So rosemary is a definite shrub that everybody should have in their yard. Next, lavender. Who wouldn't love to have lavender plants in their yard? And once again, though they look quite beautiful, they are very durable, taking, once again, the heat, the sun, the wind, dry, everything. They need very little from us, but they produce quite a bit. Next. And sages. There are many types of sages. All of them are quite beautiful. All of them have the drought resistance and low maintenance. The sage that is used in cooking and eating is called the garden sage or the Salvia officinalis. But the sage family itself is very large. They are all very attractive plants. And there were, I think at last count, something like 150 different varieties of sages with blue flowers and red flowers and purple flowers and white flowers. And all of them very tough, very durable. No yard should be without one. Next. And then there's ground covers, small plants that will be planted as a lawn substitute or in between rocks. Chamomile, the same chamomile you might make tea from, is actually a very nice little plant. In this case, it's growing in the middle of a rock garden and needs very little care from you. Next. Germander. This is a large family, beautiful plant. This particular one produces a little purple flower, but also in this family are some edibles like oregano. I think we're a little fast there. Oregano and thyme and marjoram. There we go. Okay, the next one. And next, there we go. Different types of oregano, different types of thyme make wonderful landscape plants, and they attract some beneficial insects. Next. And growing plants that attract beneficial insects will reduce the amount of insecticides that you have to use in the yard. And there are plants that will provide pollen and nectar, thus food for the beneficial insects, and some that will attract the beneficial insects because of the flower. So once again, some plants, like we've just seen, some of the herb plants are going to attract a lot of these beneficials, and some of these plants will attract the butterflies and hummingbirds, which maybe they're not beneficial, but they're fun to have around the yard. Next. So this is a list of plants that we grow quite often, and the beneficial insects that they will attract. Now, some of these plants are plants like the cilantro and the dill. They're plants that we may grow anyway for use for eating. The cilantro is great, of course, in our salsas, and the dill has a lot of uses. And if you let these plants go to seed, in other words, if you let the cilantro grow past where you actually can use it, because cilantro, the leaves change once it begins to flower. It's probably not good for us anymore at that point, but that's when it begins to attract the beneficial insects. And same thing with dill and fennel. They actually attract the beneficials after they have gone to flower or seed. So I have done this in my own yard. I've allowed the basil and the cilantro to go to seed simply for the fact that it can attract the beneficials. Next. And here's some more. And by the way, I should mention that these slides are going to be available to you. You can download these slides after the class is over. And you'll find that a lot of these plants, there's the lavender and there's the salvias. A lot of these plants are basic landscape plants that you can, lantana, and they will attract beneficials to your yard, and these beneficials will help to control some of the bad insects that invade our gardens. Next. Okay. And this was a nice handout from the University of California, and it's kind of neat. It's got colored pictures of the various beneficial insects, and gives you a little advice on how to keep them in the yard. Next. Okay, I guess we're going to go to some Q&A now. Is that correct, Karen?
Hi there. Yes. All right.
Okay.
So I will open up the question box.
Okay, hold on just a second here. I'm going to switch the screen a second. Okay.
All right. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so Ricky asked, I usually watch this from my phone, maybe include a screenshot of how to do the downloads and questions from a mobile device. All right, Ricky, good question. I will find out how to do that. Good suggestion. I will find out how to do this. Questions. All right. Okay. Next is, let's see. Okay. I've got a couple of coworkers on here. Good morning. Okay, let's see. I am a Midwest transplant that has been using a lawn service since moving here. I'm willing to transition to doing ourselves, but until then, can you recommend services that are on board, trained, and will do this as their service?
There is a company out there called True Green, and they maintain landscapes or just lawns. Stay Green is local. You've probably seen them in your neighborhood. So those are, Stay Green might be the one that I would recommend.
Okay, let's see. Will SCV ever provide compost containers as some communities in NorCal does?
Well, the city, I know they're not doing it right this minute because of this COVID thing, but the city has put on composting programs both at the Water District and at Hart Park. And if you attend those, quite often they have either reduced pricing on composting, containers, certainly a lot of information on them. But for the last several years, yes, that has been done through the County of LA and the City of Santa Clarita.
Okay, yeah, I think it's also the county. It's the county of LA County does the composting classes, and they did hold them up at our agency once every quarter, and but they put a hold on that for COVID. But you can go onto their website. I think it's called smartgardening.com, and they may have some online classes too, similar to this. I'm not sure about that, but it's worth a chance to
If
look.
not, I know that the Green Thumb Nursery has several very nice composters available for sale.
Okay, let's see. Do you have a list of people that you could recommend to come out to your yard and see what you have, talk about what you'd like, and make recommendations to begin transition?
When I have time, I do it. So just contact me.
Okay, and if you want to get a hold of John, just email me directly at kdankinger@scvwa.org, and I can get a hold of John for you. So if you want to just email me directly, that would be fine. Which plant-based mulch would you recommend to buy at a store, if any?
Oh, any and all of them. I like them all. Never seen a plant-based mulch I didn't like. It's simply a preference, your preference, the homeowner's preference, what you like. You can get chunks of bark. Some people love that. You can get shredded redwood. You can get shredded cedar. Big chunks or little chunks. It's all fine. It's just what you think would work best for your particular situation. Okay.
All right, next question. What type of grass is recommended for an area that does not get a lot of sun?
Oh, that's just a terrible situation. Grass needs sunlight. So I just can't recommend grass in the shade. Grasslands are always open areas. I would suggest something other than grass in the shade.
All right, we've got 2 questions left. So before I read those 2 questions, if any of you have some more, anybody have any other questions, why don't you go on and start writing your questions in before we finish. So let's see. Question, if our compost has dried, can we still benefit from its use if we simply re-wet it?
Compost. Well, if you've made compost and you have a compost pile, when the compost is done, a compost is typically worked into the soil. So yes, you could put it into your soil. If you're talking mulch and your mulch has dried, that's just a natural phenomenon. But once your compost is dried out, it stops breaking down. So if it's dried out, it's broken down probably as far as it's going to go, and you should start using it.
All right, next question. Any suggestions for finding someone who will come to our yard and provide good guidance on proper tree pruning?
Once again, contact Karen.
All right, and then let's see. Somebody looked it up and they said, yes, LA County is continuing to do their classes virtually, and she had just purchased a worm composter. So if you go onto smartgardening.com, that's the LA County's site for their compost classes. You can learn some more there and I guess join a virtual class and also purchase the composters. Let's see. Next question. Under fruit trees, not citrus, is it better to have mulch or ground cover?
Oh, no ground cover, no plant material. There should never be plant material competing with fruit tree roots. I use a small amount of mulch on top of my stone fruits, the peaches, plum, apricots, apples, cherries, etc. I use a small amount on them. Once again, not right up against the trunk, but just enough to help hold in moisture because I don't water my fruit trees very often.
All right. So anyways, that's the end of the questions. I did have a participant. She said she couldn't hear the audio starting at about almost 9:30. She had no more audio. So there I can see obviously the rest of you do have it, or some of you do, because questions are being asked. So anyways, hopefully that was just something on her end, on her computer. So anyways, we've got all the questions answered, and I want to thank all, oh, wait, another question just popped up. Should I use mulch when planting a magnolia tree?
Yes, yes, a magnolia would benefit from mulch, a light layer, a 2-inch layer uh, above the root system and extending out a little bit beyond the root system. Yes, that would be great. And once again, as far as how much mulch would depend upon whether it was the large Magnolia grandiflora or one of the smaller varieties like the St. Mary or the Little Gem. Those last two are smaller trees, thus they'd have a smaller root system.
All right, and then just one last comment. It's one of our, actually our brand new board of directors. She said thank you, and this was great. So I want to thank all of you participants that are online with us this morning. Thank you for joining us and sticking with us. We will see you next month, and next month's class is Designing a Sustainable Landscape. So March 6th, Designing a Sustainable Landscape. And we thank you for anybody new that's joined us for the first time. Thank you for joining us this morning. And for our regulars that we have on every month, we do appreciate it. And a couple other comments came up. Let's see. Thank you. This is awesome. On a journey, beginning as an empty nester. So now she's got more time to spend in her yard, which is wonderful. And another person, thank you for all the helpful information. So thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you all next month. Have a great one. If you have any needs or any questions, my email, KDENKINGER, I'll say it again, KDENKINGER at scvwa.org. Stands for Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency.org. Send me an email, and I will get back. Any questions or comments or anything that you need, just go ahead and email me. And thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.
All right, Karen, see you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.